I stood there, the pen heavy in my hand, staring at the papers in front of me. My son's voice echoed in my mind. It's for your own good, Mom. The nursing home is the best option. I had given him everything, my time, my love, my life, but now I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. He wanted to sign me away, to take away my independence, so I made my choice. If he wanted to erase me from his life, I'd erase him from mine instead. One signature, and I signed him out of my estate. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Evelyn Brooks sat at her oak kitchen table, the same one where she had once signed her mortgage papers and her daughter's permission slips, now facing her son across a glossy stack of forms that smelled faintly of fresh ink. The Florida humidity pressed against the windows, thick and unrelenting, but it wasn't the weather making her chest tighten. It was David's smile, too wide, too eager, the kind of smile he only used when he was hiding something. Just a few signatures, Mom, David said, nudging the stack toward her again with 2 fingers. His nails tapped against the polished wood, steady and insistent. Evelyn adjusted her reading glasses, letting them rest low on her nose as she peered at the fine print. The words swam with bureaucratic coldness. Admission agreement, residential care, assisted living facility. It was all there, dressed up in legal jargon, but stripped of humanity. Monica leaned forward, her perfume strong and floral, as if to cover the stench of betrayal in the room. It's safer for everyone, she said smoothly, her manicured hands folded like a news anchor's. You'll have 24-hour help, meals, activities. No more worrying about stairs or cooking. Don't you want peace of mind? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She traced a finger across the margins, the paper crisp beneath her touch. No choice, no dignity, just a signed surrender. Across from her, Lily shifted uncomfortably, 17, bright-eyed, perched on the edge of her chair as if she wanted to vanish into the wallpaper. But her voice slipped out, soft and urgent, just enough for Evelyn to hear. Grandma, don't sign. The girl's whisper landed heavier than any argument. Evelyn glanced at her granddaughter, at the fear in her eyes, the loyalty that burned despite the pressure sitting 2 chairs away. It reminded her of something unshakable. She still mattered, not as a burden, but as a presence. David's hand tapped faster, his jaw tightening when Evelyn didn't reach for the pen. Mom, let's not make this difficult, he said. These places aren't what you think. It's just practical. Evelyn lifted her chin, her voice firm but calm. Not today. With deliberate force, she slid the papers back across the table, the edges catching on the wood grain. The shuffle of paper was louder than anyone expected. For a moment, silence hung in the kitchen. Monica's smile faltered, her lips thinning into a sharp line. David leaned back, his face hardening as if she'd just refused a generous offer instead of rejecting exile. You're being unreasonable, Monica said, her tone clipped. Evelyn pushed her glasses up and looked straight at her son. I've been reading contracts longer than you've been alive, David. Don't try to pass one off like it's a kindness. Lily's shoulders relaxed, just slightly, as if her grandmother had cracked open a window in a suffocating room. David finally stood, gathering the unsigned stack with a huff of frustration. Fine. We'll talk about it later. He shoved the forms into his briefcase, the metal clasp snapping shut with finality. The house was quiet after they left, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant whir of cicadas outside. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, steadying herself against the counter. She'd expected disappointment, maybe anger, but she hadn't expected the chill that lingered after their departure. Something told her David wasn't finished. Later that evening, when the air cooled slightly and the porch light flicked on, Evelyn walked out to check her mailbox. The metal creaked as she pulled it open, but what fell into her hands wasn't her usual stack of bills and newsletters. Her fingers brushed against glossy covers, thick piles of them. She stepped under the porch light and fanned them out. Brochures, sleek, colorful pamphlets, advertising assisted living facilities, each one brighter and more suffocating than the last. Smiling models sat in spotless dining rooms. Seniors played bingo under fluorescent lights, and slogans promised a new chapter of care. The edges were too sharp, the timing too neat. Evelyn knew these weren't sent by accident. They had been planted, slipped into her mailbox with intention. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the dawning certainty of a war she hadn't chosen, but one she was ready to fight. The stack of glossy brochures sat on Evelyn Brooks' kitchen counter like an accusation. Smiling strangers beamed up at her from manicured courtyards and spotless dining halls, all promising peace of mind in scripted slogans. Her fingers curled around the edges until they bent. Each page screamed the same message. You don't belong in your own home anymore. By dusk, she dragged the whole pile into the living room. The Florida evening was heavy, the kind that clung to skin even with the windows cracked. She knelt by her fireplace, coaxing a flame to life with practiced hands. When the first pamphlet curled black and shriveled, Evelyn leaned closer, the scent of burning ink filling her nostrils. Not me, she muttered. Not now. The door creaked, and Janet Wells stepped in without ceremony, as she often did. Evelyn's next-door neighbor carried the smell of the outside air, cut grass, and faint mosquito spray. Her eyes narrowed at the fire. What the hell is all this? Evidence, Evelyn said flatly, feeding another brochure to the blaze. The paper hissed and split, orange flames licking higher. Janet picked up one of the strays from the floor. Her nurse's eyes scanned it quickly, her jaw tightening. This isn't just pushy advertising. This is elder exploitation, plain and simple. Evelyn gave a humorless laugh. I know the law. They'll slip once. They always do. She tapped the side of her temple, her silver hair catching the firelight. And I'll be waiting with pen in hand. Janet leaned against the arm of the couch, arms crossed. You've got fight left. That's good. But you're not playing chess with strangers here. It's your own blood. Evelyn didn't answer right away. The flames cracked louder, the glossy paper blackening into ash. Her son's wide smile from earlier replayed in her head, false and shiny like the brochures now turning to smoke. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She wiped her hands on her skirt and picked it up. A text from Lily lit the screen. Dad's saying you're confused, telling everyone you don't know what day it is. Evelyn's grip tightened. Of course he is. She slid the phone aside and reached into the drawer by the couch, pulling out a slim black notebook. The cover was worn, its pages lined neatly with years of grocery lists and reminders. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. She sat at the table, pen poised, and wrote the first entry in crisp, deliberate strokes. April 14th, 6:17 p.m. David presented nursing home admission papers. I refused. Monica present. Lily witnessed. The words steadied her, turned chaos into record. Each line gave weight to her side of the truth, something more enduring than David's whispers. She flipped to a new page and kept writing, times, dates, details, until the paper filled with her careful script. Janet watched quietly, then said, Good. Keep every word. You'll need it. Evelyn glanced up. I will. Her hand didn't tremble as she turned another page. The sound of pen scratching against paper was sharper than the cicadas outside, sharper than her own heartbeat. By the time the fire burned down to glowing embers, the box of brochures was gone, reduced to smoke rising through the chimney and ash scattered across the grate. Evelyn closed her notebook and set it squarely in the center of the table, a declaration in itself. The night air pressed heavier against the windows. She thought she'd won a small battle, but when she opened her front door the next morning, the certainty cracked. Among the bills and coupons in her mailbox sat a stark white envelope, the kind that carried weight before it was even opened. She tore the seal, her breath sharp in her chest. The letter inside was printed in sterile black font, addressed formally to Evelyn Brooks. Her eyes skimmed the lines, each word colder than the last until the meaning struck like a hammer. Notice of petition for guardianship. David had gone to court to claim control of her life. Her son had formally declared her mentally declining, incapable of managing her own affairs. Each line branded her as frail, confused, dependent, a woman she did not recognize. Her first reaction wasn't panic, but a cold surge of fury. She steadied her breath, refusing to give David the satisfaction of imagining her rattled. She reached for her notebook, flipping to a fresh page, and wrote the words clearly across the top. David Brooks petitioned for guardianship, April 15th. Ink over paper, her first counterstrike. She rose, crossed the kitchen, and pulled her phone from its charger. Her fingers didn't hesitate as she dialed the number she'd memorized years ago from her days as a paralegal. Arthur James, elder law attorney. The line rang twice before his gravelly voice answered. Arthur James speaking. Arthur, it's Evelyn Brooks. Her tone was measured, but the undercurrent was steel. I need representation. My son's trying to take my life out from under me. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Guardianship? Filed yesterday. She glanced at the notice again, her jaw set. He's claiming I can't manage my own finances. That I'm confused, Arthur's voice sharpened. You've forgotten more law than most of these clowns ever learned. He'll regret underestimating you. Evelyn almost smiled. That's why I'm calling you. Good. First step, gather every record you've got. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance, medical reports. We'll need a full defense file already on it. She didn't mention the binder waiting on her bookshelf, the one she had started the night the brochures arrived. By the time she hung up, her resolve had hardened into action. She opened her filing cabinet, the smell of paper and ink greeting her like old allies. One by one, she pulled the folders she'd kept meticulously updated. Savings ledgers, tax returns, her mortgage fully paid off 2 years ago. Every detail of her independence was there in black and white. The scrape of the cabinet drawers echoed through the quiet house, punctuated only by the thud of files landing on the table. Each document was a weapon, each folder a shield. A soft ping came from her phone. A message from Lily. Grandma, I'll tell the court what I saw. Dad tried to make you sign. I'll testify if I have to. Evelyn's throat tightened, not with weakness, but with pride. She typed back slowly. Thank you, sweetheart. We may need you. I'll keep you safe in this too. She slipped the phone aside and looked back at the mountain of papers. For the first time in days, she felt not cornered but prepared. That evening, Janet stopped by, a casserole dish in her hands, her sharp eyes scanning the table. Looks like a war room in here. It is, Evelyn replied, sliding another statement into the growing binder. Good, Janet said, setting down the dish. Because that boy doesn't know what kind of fighter raised him. The night stretched late, Evelyn working under the glow of the dining lamp, pages stacking neatly as she built her defense brick by brick. The faint scent of ink and paper clung to her fingers, grounding her with every entry. When she finally closed the binder, it was heavy, solid, undeniable. She rested her hands on the cover, as though sealing a promise. The next morning, her phone rang again. Arthur's voice was steady, deliberate. I've spoken with the clerk. The court's moving fast. They've set an evaluation date. A doctor will assess your competency. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. A slow fire lighting behind them. Then I'll show them what sharp really looks like. The evaluation room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Evelyn Brooks sat upright in the stiff-backed chair. Her notebook closed neatly on her lap. Across the table, a doctor in a gray suit adjusted his glasses. Papers spread before him like a quiz he fully expected her to fail. Evelyn caught the faintest twitch of doubt in his eyes when she didn't fidget, didn't avoid his gaze. She was here on trial, not in court but in mind, and she refused to let a single nerve show. Mrs. Brooks, the doctor began, voice measured. I'm going to ask you some questions to assess your memory and reasoning. Just answer as best you can. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, her tone cool. I've been answering questions my whole life, doctor. Go on. From the hallway, muffled footsteps echoed. David was pacing, Evelyn pictured him with arms crossed, his smug confidence resting on her stumble. Monica's clipped voice had carried earlier, insisting Evelyn wouldn't last 5 minutes. Evelyn steadied herself, the weight of their anticipation pressing at the door. The doctor shuffled his papers. "Can you tell me today's date?" "April 17th, 2023, Evelyn said crisply. "And if you'd like, I can tell you what day of the week the next April 17th will fall on." "Wednesday." The doctor raised his brows but kept going. "Who is the current governor of Florida?" "Ron DeSantis," she answered without pause. "Though I've had my disagreements with his policies." His pen scratched against the form. He leaned forward. "I'll give you 3 words. Repeat them back to me. Apple, table, penny." Evelyn smirked faintly. Apple, table, penny. Minutes passed. He asked her to subtract 7 repeatedly from 100. She rattled them off cleanly. 93, 86, 79. Her voice steady as if reading from a calculator. He gave her a picture of a clock missing numbers, asking her to fill them in. She drew each one neatly, circling the 12 with extra precision, then handed it back like an attorney submitting evidence. When he circled back, casually asking, "Now, what were the 3 words I told you earlier?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Apple, table, penny. Though personally, I prefer pears." The doctor chuckled, the first crack in his professional veneer. Outside, the waiting room door creaked. David's low voice carried in, "She must have rehearsed this." Monica's sharper whisper followed. "She's old, not stupid. But don't worry, something will slip." Evelyn's spine straightened. Every nerve in her body pushed her forward, sharper, keener, refusing to let even a syllable falter. The doctor finished with a final test. "Mrs. Brooks, can you explain the meaning of this proverb?" "A stitch in time saves 9. Evelyn leaned back, folding her hands. "It means if you mend a problem early, you prevent it from becoming bigger. Much like filing for guardianship, when there's no cause, creates a mess in court later." Arthur James, seated quietly in the corner, pressed his lips together to hide a smile. The doctor set his pen down, expression clear. "Sharp, independent, fit. You're entirely capable of managing your own affairs." Mrs. Brooks' relief washed through her chest, though she kept her smile small, reserved. Arthur stood buttoning his suit jacket and gave her a quick nod. "Case just cracked," he said under his breath, low enough that only she heard. The door opened. David stepped inside, his face expectant until he saw the doctor's notes. The smirk he'd worn earlier evaporated, replaced with a tight jaw. Monica followed, her lips pressed thin, eyes darting toward Evelyn with something close to fury. Evelyn gathered her notebook, her movements deliberate. "Well," she said, standing with dignity. "That was invigorating. Thank you, doctor." The group stepped into the hallway, the sterile lights buzzing overhead. Evelyn walked slightly ahead, chin lifted, until she caught the low rumble of David's voice behind her. "She got lucky this time," he muttered, sharp enough to slice the air. "If we can't get control through the court, we'll just take the money another way." Evelyn froze, mid-step. The words struck harder than any petition. Her son wasn't just after guardianship. He was plotting something else, and the war had only begun. The morning after the evaluation, Evelyn Brooks sat across from Arthur James in his modest office, tucked inside a weathered strip plaza between a dry cleaner and a nail salon. The hum of traffic from the 6-lane road outside seeped faintly through the walls, but inside it was quiet except for the scratch of Arthur's fountain pen against heavy paper. "Guardianship is dead in the water," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses. "But if you want to make sure David doesn't try to circle back through inheritance, we need to talk about your will." Evelyn leaned forward, her reading glasses balanced on the edge of her nose. The stacks of her carefully gathered documents were spread across his desk. Deeds, bank ledgers, insurance statements. Each sheet of paper was both proof of her independence and bait for David's greed. She tapped one finger against the table. "Erase him," she said evenly. "Erase them both." Arthur paused mid-sentence. "David and Monica. Yes, I won't reward betrayal." Not 1 cent. His eyes flickered with approval before returning to the page. "Understood. Who do you want to name as your heir?" Evelyn hesitated only long enough to let a breath fill the silence. "Lily, she's the only one with decency left." Arthur nodded, already writing. "She's still a minor, but we can create a trust that activates at 25. That way she can't be manipulated by her parents in the meantime." "Good," Evelyn said. The faintest smile tugged at her lips. "Let them choke on it." Arthur's pen scratched again, deliberate strokes marking permanence. "We'll also add a no contest clause. If David or Monica try to challenge it, they get nothing." Zero leverage. Evelyn straightened in her chair. The weight of betrayal that had hung heavy on her chest seemed to shift into something sharper, cleaner. "The pen is mine," she whispered, almost to herself. Arthur set down his pen and pushed the thick draft toward her. The paper smelled faintly of ink and new beginnings. "Review it carefully. This isn't just words, it's your shield." Evelyn picked it up, reading line by line. David's name had once been written into her legacy. Now the lines where he might have appeared were blank. Gone. Monica's, too. In their place, Lily Brooks, sole beneficiary of trust. And below that, a portion dedicated to the Tampa Senior Advocacy Fund, a cause Evelyn had quietly supported for years. It felt fitting. Some good should come from this wreckage. She signed with a steady hand, her name flowing across the page in practiced, elegant strokes. A lifetime of paralegal work had taught her the power of ink, and now she wielded it like a blade. Arthur gathered the pages, his voice firm. "This will hold. You've not only protected yourself, you've cut their lifeline." Evelyn closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "Then let them try. They'll find the well dry." When she left the office, the Florida heat pressed down like a wet blanket. She breathed it in anyway, a strange sense of freedom expanding in her chest. For the first time since David slid those nursing home papers across her kitchen table, she wasn't just reacting, she was striking back. That evening, she returned home, dropped her handbag on the couch, and walked into her study. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish, the way she liked it, and the soft hum of the air conditioning kept the humidity at bay. She placed the signed documents in a plain manila envelope, planning to secure them in her safe deposit box the next morning. She was about to pour herself a cup of tea when the faint scrape of wood from down the hall caught her ear. Too deliberate to be the house settling, too quiet to be an accident. Her steps slowed as she moved toward her study. The door was cracked open, light spilling across the carpet. She nudged it wider, her stomach tightening. There, bent over her desk, was Monica. Her manicured fingers rifled through Evelyn's drawers, shuffling papers with the precision of someone who wasn't looking for stamps or stationery, but for something worth stealing. Evelyn's voice cut through the silence, sharp as broken glass. "Looking for something, Monica?" Evelyn's voice was steady, not raised, but each syllable carried enough weight to make Monica jolt upright. Monica spun, clutching a random folder as though she'd been caught with evidence in hand. "Oh, Evelyn, I was just looking for stamps. I thought I saw some in here before." Evelyn stepped inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than any slam. She crossed the carpet slowly, her cane tapping once against the floor. "Strange place to search for stamps," she said evenly. "That drawer hasn't held mail in years." Monica laughed lightly, but her eyes betrayed the stiffness of a cornered liar. "I must have misremembered." She slid the folder back into the drawer with exaggerated care. Evelyn let the silence stretch until Monica squirmed. Then she leaned on her cane, her gaze sharp as glass. "Everything that matters is already filed where it belongs. You won't find what you're looking for here." The words hung between them like smoke. Monica smoothed her blouse, forcing a smile. You've always been particular with your files. I'll just get out of your way. She slipped past Evelyn, heels clicking down the hall. The scent of her perfume lingered in the room long after she'd gone, bitter and cloying. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her hands tightening around the edge of the desk. The next morning, Evelyn drove to the bank. The air outside was thick with Florida humidity, dampening her blouse as she stepped into the chilled lobby. She greeted the teller, signed the slip, and secured the manila envelope containing her rewritten will inside a safe deposit box. The metallic clink of the door shutting echoed with finality. No more snooping, she murmured to herself, slipping the key into her purse. That afternoon, Lily dropped by after school, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. She perched on the arm of the couch, watching her grandmother with eyes full of worry. "Mom's obsessed with your money," she blurted. "She's always on the phone with Dad, whispering about it." Evelyn set down her tea, the steam fogging her glasses slightly. She removed them, wiped them clean, and spoke calmly. "Obsession makes people careless." That's when they tripped later. Janet joined them, settling heavily into the rocking chair on the porch. Her blunt voice cut through the humid air. "Keep feeding them rope, Evelyn." "They'll hang themselves soon enough," Evelyn smirked faintly. "That's the plan." Inside, her phone buzzed with a message from Arthur. "We'll put fraud watch on all accounts. If they're foolish enough to try something, the paper trail will bury them." Evelyn typed back, "Good, I'm ready." The sun dipped low, staining the sky orange as cicadas droned in the trees. Evelyn sat on her porch swing with Lily, rocking gently, pretending for a moment that life was as peaceful as it looked. But beneath that stillness, her mind stayed sharp, turning over every angle. She knew David and Monica wouldn't stop with locked drawers. They'd push harder, and she would be ready when they did. The next day, the fight announced itself. Evelyn stood in line at the grocery store, her basket filled with fresh produce and bread. She slid her debit card into the machine, waiting for the familiar beep. Instead, the screen flash declined. The cashier tried again, same message. Heat rose in Evelyn's chest as the people in line shifted impatiently. She pulled out a credit card, paid quickly, and carried her bag outside, her cane striking the pavement faster than usual. In the driver's seat, she dialed the bank, pressing the phone hard to her ear as the humid air pressed through the windshield. The representative's voice was polite but firm. "Mrs. Brooks, your checking account was recently accessed." A withdrawal drained nearly all funds. Evelyn's fingers gripped the wheel until her knuckles whitened. She didn't need to hear the name. She already knew who had stolen from her. Evelyn Brooks sat in her car in the grocery store parking lot, the Florida sun glaring off the windshield. Sweat slid down her temple as the bank representative's voice confirmed the truth she already knew. "Mrs. Brooks, your savings account shows a withdrawal of $4,300, the woman said. "The transaction was conducted yesterday in person." "The signature on the slip matches your son's." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, gripping the steering wheel until her nails pressed crescents into the leather. She spoke evenly, each word cut to size. "That withdrawal was unauthorized. Freeze the account. Flag it as fraud." "Yes, ma'am. We'll secure the remaining balance immediately." The call ended, leaving only the hum of cicadas outside and the faint hiss of her air conditioner. Evelyn reached for her notebook on the passenger seat, flipped to a clean page, and wrote, "April 19th, $4,300 withdrawn from savings by David Brooks. Unauthorized. Bank confirmed signature." The act steadied her. Ink never lied. At home, she spread the printed bank statement across her kitchen table. The numbers glared back at her, but instead of defeat, she felt the slow thrum of resolve. Every dollar stolen was another nail in David's coffin. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lily. "Dad says it's his right. That family money belongs to him anyway." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She typed back, "Money isn't a right, it's earned." And he just signed his own downfall. That evening, Arthur's office smelled of strong coffee and paper dust. He examined the bank documents with care, his thumb rubbing the edge of the withdrawal slip. This is exactly what we needed. Clear theft. He's committed financial exploitation, serious grounds for restitution. Evelyn sat across from him, her notebook open beside the statement. File it. Don't wait, Arthur nodded. Already in motion. By tomorrow, the court will have the filing. The room was quiet for a moment, save for the whir of the ceiling fan. Then Arthur added, You realize, Evelyn, this is more than just recovering the money. With this, the judge will see him for what he is. Guardianship is gone for good. Evelyn allowed herself a thin smile. Good. Let him see the paper trail. Every move he's made is already in my binder. She returned home late, the night humid and heavy. Lily sat waiting on the porch steps, her face pale in the glow of the porch light. Grandma, she whispered. Dad's angry. He said you're out to ruin him. Evelyn brushed a strand of hair from her granddaughter's cheek. Truth ruins liars, Lily. Not me. Inside, she slid the bank record into her binder, its pages already thick with documentation. She smoothed the plastic sleeve with care, then closed it firmly. The binder sat like a loaded weapon on the table. The next morning began unremarkably. The rattle of the coffee pot, the scent of toast crisping in the toaster. But mid-morning, the sound of tires crunching gravel drew Evelyn to the window. A white county sheriff's cruiser rolled into her driveway, its lights off, but presence undeniable. Her heart kicked against her ribs. She stepped onto the porch just as the deputy climbed out, papers in hand. He nodded respectfully. Mrs. Brooks, you're Evelyn Brooks. Yes. Her voice was calm, though her pulse raced. He held out the envelope, the seal fresh. This is a civil summons. David Brooks is being served in connection with your bank fraud claim. Just wanted you to know it's official. Evelyn accepted the papers, her hand steady. The heat of the Florida sun bore down, but inside her chest the air felt lighter. Somewhere across town, her son was about to open his door and find a deputy waiting with the truth he couldn't dodge. The courthouse loomed over downtown Tampa, a squat concrete building softened only by the palms lining its front steps. Evelyn Brooks gripped her cane in one hand and her binder in the other as she climbed each stair, her back straight, her breath measured. The Florida heat pressed against her shoulders, but inside her chest there was only cool resolve. Arthur James matched her pace, his briefcase swinging at his side. You're steady, he murmured. That's exactly what the judge will notice. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with the low hum of voices. Evelyn's shoes clicked softly against the linoleum floor as she walked to her seat. David and Monica were already there, dressed as if for a performance. David wore a navy suit too tight across the shoulders, his grin sharp and practiced. Monica's pearl necklace gleamed under the fluorescent lights, her posture rehearsed, like a woman ready for a photo op. When Evelyn entered, David leaned back in his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. Didn't think you'd actually come, he said under his breath. You could have saved yourself the trouble. Evelyn didn't answer. She placed her binder gently on the table and slid her glasses into place. Her silence was louder than any insult. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Merrill, a stern woman with silver hair pulled tight into a bun, took her seat behind the bench. She scanned the room quickly, eyes landing on Evelyn, then David. Arthur rose first. Your Honor, we're here regarding financial exploitation against my client, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, by her son, David Brooks. He laid the bank statement on the judge's bench, the pages crisp, the numbers glaring. David smirked, glancing toward Monica as though victory was still assured. But Judge Merrill's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the documents. Mr. Brooks, she said sharply, these show a withdrawal of over $4,000 from your mother's account. Care to explain why your name appears on the authorization slip? David leaned forward, spreading his hands like a salesman closing a deal. It's family money, Your Honor. I was just moving it around to keep things safe for her. She's been forgetful lately, misplacing things. I didn't want her funds at risk, Evelyn finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. I've managed my finances without error for over 50 years, Your Honor. The only risk to my money is sitting across from me. The courtroom fell quiet for a beat, the weight of her words hanging thick in the air. Arthur gestured toward Evelyn. If the court would allow my client to testify. Judge Merrill nodded. Proceed. Evelyn stood, cane steady, and stepped toward the witness stand. Her hands didn't shake as she raised them to be sworn in. Once seated, she placed her binder on her lap like a shield. Arthur's questions were measured. Mrs. Brooks, did you authorize your son to withdraw funds from your account on April 19th? No, Evelyn said simply. Have you ever given your son financial power of attorney? Never. And who discovered the unauthorized withdrawal? I did, Evelyn said, her gaze steady on the judge. I contacted the bank immediately. They confirmed his signature was on the slip. She slid her binder open, producing the record she'd printed, her notes in tidy script lining the margin. Arthur held it up. Your Honor, this is Exhibit B. Judge Merrill studied it with pursed lips, her eyes hardening. Then came Lily's turn. The teenager walked nervously to the stand, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Her voice trembled at first but steadied as she spoke. I saw my dad bragging about taking the money. He said it was his right. He told my mom over the phone, and I overheard. Monica stiffened, her jaw locking. David shot Lily a look sharp enough to cut, but the girl didn't back down. She leaned into the microphone. Grandma never gave permission. I'll swear to that. The courtroom shifted, neighbors from the gallery whispering, a clerk tapping her pen nervously. Evelyn sat taller, pride swelling as her granddaughter stood against her own parents. Judge Merrill's voice broke the murmur. Mr. Brooks, this is not a misunderstanding. This is theft, and financial exploitation of an elder is a serious offense. Her gavel struck once, the sound sharp as a crack of thunder. David's smirk was gone now, replaced with a tight-lipped grimace. Monica's pearls suddenly looked like a choke chain around her neck. The judge leaned forward, her tone final. We will schedule a restitution hearing. And Mr. Brooks, you should prepare yourself. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening around her binder. The war was far from over, but today, in this room, the tide had shifted. The restitution hearing packed the courtroom tighter than before. Word had spread. Neighbors, retirees, even a few reporters filled the gallery. The air smelled of old wood and anticipation, the hum of whispered speculation carrying through the room like static before a storm. Evelyn Brooks stood at the center of it all, her cane steady, her binder clasped tight against her ribs like a soldier's shield. David arrived flanked by Monica, their expressions taut with defiance. He wore the same navy suit, but the swagger was gone. His eyes darted to the judge's bench and then to the gallery, as though measuring how far his reputation had already unraveled. Monica whispered something sharp in his ear, but her pearl necklace only gleamed like a noose under the fluorescent lights. Judge Merrill entered, her gavel cracking once. This hearing will determine restitution and the validity of Mr. Brooks' guardianship petition. Her gaze swept the room. Proceed. Arthur rose with measured confidence, his voice cutting through the air. Your Honor, my client has been accused by her own son of incompetence. Yet here is the reality. She passed every competency exam, manages her affairs with clarity, and now has the evidence of theft committed against her by the very man claiming to protect her. He handed up the binder, Evelyn's careful documentation organized with dates and notes. The judge flipped through, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. David stood abruptly, his voice rising. That binder means nothing. She's been confused for months. She just writes things down so she can pretend she remembers. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes cut back to the documents. Confused people don't keep records like this, Mr. Brooks. They don't catalog withdrawals, conversations, and phone calls, down to the minute. Evelyn finally rose to speak, her voice calm but resonant. Your Honor, I've worked with contracts and law for decades. I know what it means when someone tries to erase you with a signature. My son tried to sign me away into a nursing home. And when that failed, he signed my name at the bank to take what was not his. The gallery stirred, whispers swelling until the bailiff barked for silence. Arthur added the final blow. Bank representatives confirmed the signature as David Brooks. We request the guardianship petition be dismissed permanently and restitution ordered. Judge Merrill leaned back, her hands folded. She studied David with an expression of cool disgust. Mr. Brooks, you petitioned to take control of your mother's life, and in the process, you exposed your own greed. This court denies your guardianship petition. Permanently. You will not bring it before me again. David's face flushed red. His lips pressed into a furious line. The judge continued, voice crisp as steel. Furthermore, the deed to Mrs. Brooks' property and her accounts are confirmed solely in her name. They will remain so. And regarding the theft of $4,300, this court orders you to repay the full amount with penalties. The gavel slammed. The sound reverberated through the chamber, final and merciless. Lily, seated just behind Evelyn, leaned forward, her voice trembling but bright. You beat them, Grandma. Evelyn turned, her eyes softening. She brushed her granddaughter's hand. No, she said quietly, but loud enough for Monica and David to hear. I signed them out. The phrase cut sharper than any gavel. David's jaw clenched, Monica's eyes narrowed, but the gallery erupted into murmurs of admiration. Evelyn stood taller, her cane not a crutch, but a banner. After court adjourned, Evelyn stepped into the humid Tampa air, her lungs filling with relief. The fight wasn't finished, but for the first time, she felt the ground firmly under her feet. David had lost his power grab. She had won, not just her case, but her name. Yet victory was never simple. 2 days later, as she watered her porch plants, Janet arrived with her phone in hand, her face stormy. You'd better see this, she said, thrusting the screen forward. On the neighborhood Facebook group, a fresh post gleamed with venom. Poor Evelyn Brooks, losing her mind, doesn't know what day it is. Court was a pity show. Sad to see her decline, the profile picture was Monica's. Evelyn's lips tightened as she scrolled, reading the thread of gossip that spread like wildfire. The fight had left the courtroom. Now it was in the streets, whispered over fences and coffee tables. The war was far from over. By the week's end, whispers floated across fences and grocery aisles. Evelyn Brooks' name carried the sour edge of pity. Paranoid, confused. Court was a charity show. The words weren't spoken to her face, but Evelyn had lived long enough to know when conversations cut off the moment she entered a room. The source became clear when Elaine, her chatty neighbor 2 streets over, stopped by under the guise of returning a casserole dish. Her smile was brittle, too rehearsed. I ran into Monica at the community center, Elaine said, sliding the dish onto Evelyn's counter. She was worried about you. Said you've been, well, a little paranoid, forgetting things, mixing up dates. I told her you seemed fine, but... Evelyn cut her off gently, a sharp edge under the calm. Elaine, you've known me for 30 years. Have you ever once seen me mix up a date? Elaine flushed, fiddling with her keys. No, but she made it sound convincing, Evelyn finished. She straightened her back. Then it's time my neighbors hear the truth from me, not from a woman pawing through my desk drawers. 2 days later, Evelyn set her dining table with polished china and fresh lemon cake, the scent of citrus filling the house. Sunlight spilled across the lace tablecloth as she welcomed half a dozen neighbors, Elaine included. Janet sat at the head like a co-general, her sharp eyes daring anyone to doubt Evelyn. Lily poured iced tea, her hands steady despite the weight of being 17 and standing against her parents. Evelyn began without preamble. Some of you may have heard Monica's stories about me. Consider this your chance to see for yourselves. She gestured to the notebook beside her plate. Its black cover was plain, but the pages inside glowed with her steady script. Lily picked it up and opened to the entry about David's guardianship petition, then another detailing the bank theft. She read them aloud, her clear voice filling the room. Each line carried dates, times, signatures, evidence stacked neatly like bricks. When she finished, Janet gave a sharp nod. Case closed at the table. The neighbors exchanged glances. Elaine shifted uncomfortably, then spoke. She told us you'd lost track of your money, but this isn't confusion. This is meticulous. It's survival, Evelyn corrected, sipping her tea. The clink of porcelain underscored her words. Monica wants to paint me as fading so she and David can bleed me dry. But I won't hand them a dime, or my dignity. The tension in the room softened. One by one, heads nodded. By the time plates of cake were scraped clean, Evelyn felt the tide turn. Neighbors leaned toward her with offers of rides, of watching the house, of keeping their ears open. The rumors had begun to wither. That evening, Arthur came by, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder. He set his briefcase on the table, scanning the remnants of the tea gathering. "You've done well, Evelyn. But gossip sticks. Best we file a defamation claim. Courts don't just punish theft, they punish lies, too." Evelyn's lips curved into a thin smile. Let her see what truth looks like on paper. Arthur pulled out the form, his pen gliding across the lines. The sound of his writing was crisp, final. Evelyn felt a flicker of satisfaction. Paper wasn't just her weapon, it was her language. By the week's end, whispers around the block had shifted. Instead of pitying clucks, she heard murmurs of admiration. Sharp as ever. Not someone to mess with. Monica's version of the story had crumbled under the weight of Evelyn's evidence. For a fleeting moment, peace returned. Evelyn walked her garden in the evening, the scent of jasmine drifting through the warm air, her notebook tucked under her arm like a trusted companion. But when she returned to the porch, Janet was waiting, a folded paper in hand. Her friend's voice was grim. "David's not finished. He just filed an appeal." Evelyn's fingers tightened on the notebook, the night air pressing heavier. The battle was about to return to court. The courthouse was cooler than the sticky Tampa air outside, but tension clung just as thick. Evelyn Brooks entered with her cane steady and her binder tucked against her side like a soldier's pack. She wore a pale blue blouse, pressed sharp, her silver hair pinned neatly. Today wasn't just another hearing, it was her son's desperate attempt to claw back what he'd already lost. David sat 2 rows ahead, whispering to his lawyer, a slick man with gelled hair and a tie knotted too tight. Monica perched beside him, pearls gleaming, her expression smug. But Evelyn saw the undercurrent. Their confidence was thinner now, paper thin. When the bailiff called for order, the judge, Merrill again, settled into her seat, her sharp eyes sweeping the courtroom. Evelyn noticed how they lingered on David, a silent reminder of past humiliation. David's lawyer rose, clearing his throat with practiced theatrics. "Your Honor, my client never intended to exploit his mother. The withdrawal was a misunderstanding. A son, attempting to manage family funds. Mrs. Brooks, while admirable, has shown signs of forgetfulness. Our position is simply that her affairs require oversight for her own protection." Evelyn sat straighter, her grip tightening on her cane. Forgetfulness. The word stung, not because it was true, but because it was weaponized. Arthur James rose with measured calm, his voice crisp. "Your Honor, opposing counsel suggests forgetfulness, but we don't trade in suggestions here. We trade in evidence." He reached into his briefcase, withdrawing a thick folder bound with clips. "This is the full competency exam conducted last month, administered by a state-appointed physician, not by family or friends." He placed it on the bench with a satisfying thud. Results: Mrs. Brooks is not only competent, but exceeds expected benchmarks for her age. Her memory, logic, and reasoning are intact. She is fit, independent, and fully capable of managing her estate. Judge Merrill flipped through the file, her lips twitching at a particularly thorough answer. The sound of the pages turning filled the room like ticking clock hands. Arthur continued, his tone sharpening. Meanwhile, the only documented confusion in this case belongs to David Brooks, who seems confused about the difference between guardianship and theft. A ripple of quiet laughter traveled through the gallery. Monica's jaw stiffened. David flushed deep red. Judge Merrill snapped the file closed. I see no grounds for appeal here. None. This guardianship petition was not only baseless, it was malicious. The court dismissed it before, and it will stay dismissed. Permanently. Her gavel came down once, the sound final, like a door slamming shut. David surged to his feet. But the judge silenced him with a glare. Mr. Brooks, sit down before you compound your errors. The room shifted, tension breaking into murmurs of approval. Evelyn exhaled slowly, steady, and turned to Arthur. Paper beats greed. Arthur gave her the faintest smile. Every time. Lily slipped from the gallery and rushed to her grandmother's side, wrapping her arms tight around her. You did it, Grandma. You really did it. Evelyn kissed the top of her granddaughter's head, her eyes softening. No, sweetheart. We did it. From across the aisle, Janet let out a triumphant bark of laughter. Done and dusted. That boy just got spanked in front of half the county. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. The air felt lighter as Evelyn walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the past weeks loosening from her shoulders. She had entered this building accused of being unfit. She left it affirmed, stronger than ever. But wars rarely end in one battle. That evening, Arthur stopped by her house, placing a stack of documents on the kitchen table. His expression was serious but calm. One last step, Evelyn. We need to finalize the trust. It's the lock on the vault. Nothing David or Monica can do will break it. Evelyn smoothed her hand across the papers, the faint smell of ink still rising from the fresh pages. Her eyes narrowed with determination. Tomorrow she would sign. The Strip Plaza office smelled faintly of toner and coffee when Evelyn Brooks walked in, cane tapping against the tiled floor. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, striping Arthur James's desk in pale gold. Before her lay the thick sheaf of documents that would end the war, not in court, not in whispers, but on papers so airtight even David couldn't weasel a finger through. Arthur adjusted his glasses, flipping to the first page. This is an irrevocable trust, Evelyn. Once you sign, it can't be undone. Not by you, not by them, not by anyone. Your assets will be sealed tighter than Fort Knox. Evelyn lowered herself into the chair, smoothing her blouse. Good, she said. I'm done leaving doors open for snakes. Arthur's pen slid across the paper as he explained the terms. Lily will be the sole heir, but she won't have direct access until she's 25. That prevents David and Monica from manipulating her while she's young. He tapped another section. And here, 5% designated to the Tampa Senior Advocacy Fund. It's a statement as much as a donation. You're showing the world you value protection, not exploitation. Evelyn skimmed the page, her reading glasses perched low. The words were sharp, final, perfect. Arthur stamped the corner with his notary seal, the press clicking loudly in the quiet office. Ironclad, he said, holding it up. Even if they try, this trust will hold. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt her shoulders ease. She exhaled slowly, the kind of release that came after carrying too much for too long. Then it's finished. Arthur shook his head with a faint smile. Finished for them. For you, it's just beginning. You've taken back control outside. The Florida air was hot and thick, but Evelyn didn't mind. Janet was waiting on the bench by the entrance, sipping an iced coffee. She squinted at the documents in Evelyn's hands. So, did you stick the knife in? Evelyn sat beside her, lips curving into the faintest smile. Sharper than any knife. That pen of mine cuts deeper than he ever knew. Janet barked a laugh, slapping her knee. Good. About time that night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the trust papers tucked securely in her safe deposit envelope. Lily sat across from her, chin in her hands, eyes wide with relief. So I'll inherit everything when I'm 25. Evelyn reached across, brushing her granddaughter's cheek. You'll inherit freedom. Money means nothing if it comes with strings. This way, you'll have it when you're old enough to keep it safe. Lily's eyes softened, tears glimmering. I don't care about the money, Grandma. I just care that you're safe, Evelyn smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. I am now. The house was quiet that evening, cicadas buzzing faintly outside, the smell of lemon polish still lingering from her afternoon cleaning. For the first time since David had slid those nursing home papers across her table, Evelyn allowed herself to lean back, sip her tea, and breathe like a woman who had truly won. But wars never end neatly. The next morning, as she stepped onto the porch to fetch her newspaper, Evelyn spotted a thick envelope wedged among the bills and flyers. No return address, just her name scrawled in David's unmistakable handwriting. She carried it inside, sliding a finger under the flap. The paper inside was crumpled from angry hands, the ink pressed heavy into the page. Each sentence dripped venom, words accusing her of betrayal, of selfishness, of destroying family. The bitterness bled through the lines. A man flailing against the walls closing in on him. Evelyn read it once, folded it neatly, and set it aside. Her pulse stayed calm, but her mind sharpened. David wasn't finished, not yet. The war had just moved into its final act. The envelope sat on Evelyn Brooks' kitchen table like a live coal, its edges curled slightly from the pressure of David's hand. She had read it once already, the venomous lines carved into the paper like knife wounds. Traitor, manipulator. You've destroyed this family. Everything you have should have been mine. The words carried the smell of desperation, sweat and ink pressed too hard against the page. Evelyn smoothed the paper flat with her palm, her face calm even as her stomach twisted. David's threats were empty of law now, but full of bitterness. When Lily came in from school, she found the letter spread open. Her eyes scanned the jagged handwriting, her lips parting in disbelief. Grandma, this is awful. He doesn't even sound like a son anymore. Just... Greedy Evelyn folded the letter once, twice, then slid it back into its envelope. Her hand moved with deliberate steadiness as she grabbed a black pen from the counter. On the front, under David's scrawl of her address, she wrote in neat block letters, "Return to sender." She set it on the hall table, ready for the morning mail pickup. That's my answer, she said quietly. No reply, no fight. Just silence. Lily's brow furrowed, then softened into understanding. That's the answer, she echoed. He can't argue with silence. That evening, Janet arrived, her sandals crunching across the gravel drive. Evelyn handed her a photocopy of the letter. She'd made one before sealing it away. Janet read only a few lines before her lips curled into disgust. Pathetic, she spat. This isn't a son writing to his mother. This is a thief raging at the lock he can't pick. She walked out to the backyard, the Florida dusk heavy with the smell of hibiscus and wet soil. With Evelyn and Lily watching, she held the copy over Evelyn's old fire pit. The paper caught quickly, curling black at the edges before collapsing into ash. The faint smell of scorched ink rose into the humid air. There, Janet said, brushing her hands. That's all his words are worth. Evelyn watched the flames die down, her eyes reflecting orange before fading back to gray. Closure doesn't come from fire, she said. It comes from knowing he has no power left. The next morning, Arthur James stopped by. His tie was loose, his expression lighter than it had been in weeks. He sat at the table, sipping the coffee Evelyn placed before him, and tapped the sealed envelope marked "Return to Sender." That's the best response you could give, he said. No words, no engagement. Legally, you're untouchable. Personally, you've told him exactly where he stands. Outside my life, Evelyn said. Arthur nodded. Final closure, Evelyn. The trust is sealed, the guardianship denied, restitution ordered. He's out. Evelyn reached for her notebook. Sliding her pen across the page, she wrote one last entry. David Brooks, removed from estate, will, trust, and life. The signature is mine. She closed the notebook with a soft thud, her fingers resting on its worn cover. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was preparing for battle. She felt like she had already won. The day passed quietly. Evelyn tended her garden, the scent of damp soil rising as she watered her tomato plants. Lily studied on the porch, her headphones hanging loosely around her neck. Janet stopped by with fresh peaches. Life began tentatively to feel ordinary again, but wars leave echoes. The following morning, when Evelyn unfolded her newspaper at the breakfast table, the headline nearly leapt off the page. Mother fights back against exploitation. Local woman stands up to guardianship abuse. Beneath it was her name, her story, her photograph, taken outside the courthouse, binder in hand, her cane steady. Evelyn's tea cooled as she stared at the print. The private war she had waged with paper and pen had just gone public. And everyone in Tampa was about to read it. By sunrise, the local paper had spread across driveways and breakfast tables all over Tampa. Evelyn Brooks's name was no longer confined to court dockets or neighborhood gossip threads. It was splashed across the front page beside a photograph of her stepping out of the courthouse, cane in one hand, binder in the other. Evelyn's phone buzzed nonstop that morning. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid the rumors now rang her line with congratulations. Elaine called first, her voice flustered but sincere. Evelyn, I should have believed you sooner. You look so strong in that picture. Everyone's talking about it. And not the way Monica wanted. Evelyn chuckled softly, stirring cream into her coffee. Better late than never, Elaine. When she stepped outside to water her tomato plants, 2 women from down the block waved from the sidewalk, calling out, "We read the article! Good for you, Evelyn." Their voices carried with the cheer of a victory parade. The whispers that once clung to her like mildew had vanished, replaced with admiration that felt fresh as morning air. She had answered lies not with rebuttals, but with headlines that couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, David's name was mud. The article didn't spare him, quoting court documents that detailed the theft, the failed guardianship, and the restitution order. At the grocery store, Evelyn overheard someone mutter near the checkout, "That's the guy who tried to lock up his own mother." The clerk snorted. Shameful. Humiliation stuck to David like swamp heat. Evelyn knew it because she didn't see him anymore. Not on her porch, not pacing her driveway, not hovering at her mailbox. He had shrunk into silence, hiding from the very community he once tried to impress. Monica, too, shifted. She no longer carried herself like a polished strategist. At the country club she used to brag about, people whispered that she was married to the man who lost everything in court. She distanced herself publicly, posting cheerful photos online of brunches and shopping trips that conspicuously excluded David. Even her pearls seemed dimmer when Evelyn caught sight of her at the market. Eyes averted, lips pressed thin. Inside Evelyn's home, however, there was no dimming. Lily glowed with pride, her every word charged with admiration. "Grandma, you're kind of famous," she said, holding up her phone to show comments flooding social media. Strangers were applauding Evelyn as a symbol of strength against elder exploitation. Evelyn only smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for fame." "I know," Lily said softly, "but people need to see what you did. They need to know they can fight too." In the days that followed, Evelyn carried her fight beyond her front porch. She walked into the Tampa Senior Center, cane clicking on the tile floor, and offered her time as a volunteer. "I have experience with contracts and with court," she told the director. "If anyone here is worried about their kids or their finances, I want to help them put things in writing." The smell of strong coffee and disinfectant filled the lounge, the sound of seniors playing dominoes echoing in the corner. Evelyn sat at a round table, showing a retired teacher how to organize her papers, how to guard her accounts. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt not just victorious, but useful. When she returned home that evening, Janet was waiting on her porch swing, rocking with the easy rhythm of a woman who'd lived enough to savor peace. She squinted up at Evelyn, grinning. "You signed your freedom, you know. Not just from them, but from fear." Evelyn lowered herself beside her, the twilight heavy with the smell of orange blossoms. "Freedom tastes better than I imagined," she said, her voice warm but edged with steel. The sun dipped below the horizon, cicadas buzzing louder, when Lily came bounding out with a small gift bag in her hands. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she handed it over. "For you, Grandma. You've earned it inside, cushioned in velvet, lay a sleek silver pen. Etched into its side in delicate script was a single word: unstoppable." Evelyn traced the engraving with her fingertip, the weight of it solid in her palm. For a moment, she said nothing, only breathed in the night air heavy with promise. The silver pen gleamed beneath the lamplight, its engraving catching the glow. Unstoppable. Evelyn Brooks had placed it in a glass frame that now hung above her desk, next to the shelves lined with her binders. Every time she passed it, the weight of those weeks, every hearing, every accusation, every betrayal, tightened into one word, etched in steel. She stood before it now, cane steady, a small smile touching her lips. The pen wasn't just a gift. It was proof that she hadn't just survived, she had written the ending herself. In the living room, Lily sat cross-legged on the couch, her textbook spread in a messy sprawl. Highlighters capped and uncapped, pages tabbed, her brow furrowed with focus. Evelyn leaned against the doorway, watching her granddaughter read aloud from a thick volume of case law. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" Evelyn asked. Lily looked up, eyes shining with conviction. "Law school. I want to fight for people like you, Grandma. People who get cornered and don't know how to push back." Evelyn's chest tightened with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Her fight had cost her a son, but it had also lit a fire in her granddaughter. "Good," she said softly. "You'll be sharper than me." And sharper than him that afternoon. Janet stopped by, as she always did, carrying a bag of oranges from her tree. She plopped them on the counter and grinned. "Every time I see that headline framed in your kitchen, I get a little thrill." "You didn't just win, Evelyn. You rewrote the rules." Evelyn laughed, a dry but warm sound. "I didn't rewrite the rules. I just remembered how to use them." Janet pointed toward the framed pen. "Well, that pen of yours cut deeper than a knife." Arthur James arrived later, his briefcase neatly packed, his tie loosened in the Florida heat. He set down a stack of fresh papers on the kitchen table. "Final amendment to the trust," he said. "We've reinforced every clause. Even if David sells his last shirt to hire a lawyer, he won't break it." He slid the top page toward her, his eyes kind but serious. "Everything's airtight now." Evelyn lowered herself into her chair, smoothing the paper with her palm. Her reflection flickered in the glossy surface. Older, sharper, undefeated. She reached for the framed pen, lifting it from the wall, the glass cool against her fingers. Carefully, she opened it, slid the pen free, and held it over the page. Her hand didn't tremble. The nib pressed down, ink flowing steady and dark across the signature line. As the loops of her name curved into their final stroke, Evelyn felt the war collapse into silence. One last act, one last line, one last shield. She set the pen down gently, the faint smell of ink lingering in the air. Lily leaned forward, resting her chin in her hands. "That's it, isn't it?" Evelyn nodded, her eyes on the page. One signature changed it all. The room was still, filled only with the hum of the air conditioning and the muted sound of cicadas outside. Janet's eyes glistened with pride. Arthur closed his briefcase, satisfied. Lily reached for her grandmother's hand, squeezing it tight. Evelyn looked at each of them, her circle smaller than it once had been, but stronger, truer. She had been tested by betrayal, cornered by greed, but she had written her way out, not just of a trap, but into a legacy. She lifted her chin, her voice firm, carrying the weight of everything she'd endured. My son tried to sign me into a nursing home, so I signed him out of my estate instead.